Whenever I'm asked about how long I've actually been into iOS music making, I always get it wrong because I usually answer that I started getting into it back in late 2014. And it turns out that that's actually 2 years off. You see, I got my first phone 10 years ago back in November 2012. And here we are 10 years later in 2022, and so much has happened since then. And I thought it would be a fun idea to go back, scour through the 93 apps that I actually got on the phone that first year to see what I actually used for music. And if those old apps are still available today, if they're functioning, and if they are, then am I still using them? Now we're gonna get into music apps, but I wanted to show you this screenshot first. What you're looking at here are the first 4 apps that I ever downloaded on the App Store. So basically these apps were really essential to me back then. And now everybody is looking at the Facebook app rolling their eyes. Now the absolute first app is this one down here. It's a banking app for a Swedish bank. The next one here is the official app for Swedish radio, basically public service. Now, the next one here is the Google app, because before I bought an iPhone, I had never ever in my entire life owned an Apple product. Before the iPhone, I was using an HTC Wildfire, an Android device, and before that, I was only using PC builds that I made myself and PC laptops, so I was a Windows guy. Basically, I didn't like the Safari app, and I was so accustomed to Google, I needed it, so I downloaded that first. And then, of course, Facebook was really essential to me. Now, I do want to say this though, that most of these apps I did not pay for. I grabbed them during giveaways, and I was using app tracking sites and app tracking apps. Yeah, I know that's weird, but that used to be a thing. Anyone remember App Shopper? Well, I was also reading blogs, I was getting messages and emails from friends telling me this and that was free, so I grabbed anything that wasn't nailed down with a price, just grabbed it. And one of those apps was Digi Drummer Lite by Magnus Larsson. Now, I've checked, this app is no longer available on the App Store, and it's even hard to find archived versions. But I did manage to find this very fuzzy looking video on YouTube.
Alright, so what it gives you is a bunch of different options, such as Tom 1, Tom 2, Crash, Ride, Kick, Snare, Open Hi-Hat, and Closed Hi-Hat.
It's basically a touch interface drumming app. That's actually not the only app. There are other apps like 808 Drum here by OnBeat Limited. It's also a drumming app, so it's basically just triggers with drum samples behind them. And I ended up not using these apps because in the end, I couldn't comfortably capture whatever I was doing with these apps and then use that to build a song in another app. It was a hard thing to do. And so I heavily focused on trying to find apps that were more complete solutions, apps that would allow me to add drums and synthesizers and effects and modulations all from within one app, because it just made music making that much simpler. Another thing that is really interesting is that this was back in November 2012. And so it is actually a month before the first ever version of Audio Bus coming out. Today we are used to being able to just open up apps inside other apps as AUV3s. We don't really have problems connecting up MIDI or audio. But back here, November 2012, we're a month before we can even stream live audio between apps. Audio Bus changed that. And if you are interested in hearing the full story of the development that has been done with iOS music making the past decade, well, there is a video called The History of iOS Music App Making. I'm very proud of it, and the video is popping out in the card in the upper right corner, and it's also linked down in a pinned comment and in the description. Now, I kept exploring the App Store because I wanted to find something that I could really use to make music with. And one app that I found was Rhythm Studio by Filomeno. I'm not going to pronounce that, but it was a groove box which allowed you to choose between various instruments. And in there you could find a 303 bass line, you can find an 808 drum, a DX FM synthesizer. This thing was great. I loved it. It sounded great. It was so much fun to work with. It had so much to offer. But at some point, I found an old friend from my old desktop days. And as soon as that happened, I switched Groovebox instantly. Yes, I'm talking about RB338 Rebirth. This thing, what an amazing app. Now, if you actually compare it to the Rhythm Studio one, the Rhythm Studio one actually has more on offer. It has more types of synthesizers, and you can mix them up any way you want, while RB338 Rebirth, it only has two synths, which are pretty much emulations of TB303s. And then it has a TR-808 drum machine and a TR-909 drum machine. Now, to be fair to RB338 Rebirth, there used to be skins, or mods as they were called, that you can use to switch out not only the looks of the app, but also the sounds of the drum machines. So new mods came with new sounds. And back in the day, when I was using this on desktop and laptop systems, there were a ton of these mods that you could download. However, the iOS app version, it only had a few of those mods. So did I make music with these apps? Well, I never ended up really making music with Rhythm Studio because I found Rebirth and I just like Rebirth more. So when I found it, I stopped using Rhythm Studio and never really touched it again. And I did make music with Rebirth, and it was kind of tedious because this thing doesn't have stem support, so you kind of have to mute tracks one by one and then export whatever you want to export and then send that into whatever app you want to use it in. So, well, in the end, these apps aren't available anymore. Unless you downloaded them before they were removed, you can't really get to them anymore. But I'm quite impressed that both of these apps still work on my newest iPad, which is an iPad Pro 11-inch from 2018. Now, the next app I want to show you is not an app that I used to make music with. You can't really make music with it because it contains ready-made music that someone else made, Dub Selector. Now, this app has its origin in Flash games. Back in the day, I used to be on Newgrounds a lot. I used to be on board.com and play Flash games. And somehow I stumbled upon this Magic Wheel site or whatever, and I found these Dub Selector Flash games. So it's basically someone taking dub songs, cutting them up in different loops and triggers, and building a nice looking interface around it. So you can trigger loops, trigger one-shots, and things like that. I had a lot of fun playing around with these surfaces. And so when I found out that Dub Selector had an app on iOS, I instantly downloaded it. Now, unfortunately, it's been lost to time. I don't even have this app saved on any iDevice, so I can't play around with it. But fortunately, someone did a little play session with it. And I'm not going to play the music in here because I don't want any copyrights. But if you do want to hear what it was all about, listen to some nice dub music and check out this app, then I'll link to the video that I'm showing you right here down in the pinned comment. Now, there is this one app that I got back in 2012 that I am still using today. And I'm talking about Figure. I cannot overstate how important Figure has been to me in my mobile studio. You see, I've opened up Figure so many mornings just to document ideas. And it turns out that some of the melodies I started back in 2013 stuck with me all the way up to when I produced my Mellow album, where I took these melodies and turned them into fully produced songs. Not only that, it also turns out that some of the ideas I started in Figure turned into a lot of the demo music you've been hearing in my haQ attaQ videos. Whenever I'm reviewing a synthesizer or a drum machine or something like that, well, they started as Figure ideas. Figure is actually the first music app I ever paid for. It costed me $1 back then, but later on, Reason Studios, formerly known as Propellerhead, they made it into a free app. And it's still free. It's still on the App Store. Go get it. Now, another app that still exists on the App Store that I still use today is Sound Prism by attaQ. It has come out in 3 different versions over the years, and it's made by some of the same people who also worked on Audio Bus. The reason why I like this app so much is because I'm basically a machinist. I love pressing buttons and pads and stuff, and I'm a shitty keyboard player, and I don't have the patience to learn how to properly play the keyboards. Yeah, I know, I've been doing digital music making for almost 30 years, but never gotten around to properly play the piano. But that's the thing with Sound Prism. It makes playing fun because you basically just have to track 2 fingers, one for bass notes and one for chords. And it's so easy to play stuff in here and try out chord progressions and melodies. If you're interested in stuff like this, I suggest you go for the absolutely newest app called attaQ. Now, another app I got back in 2012 was DM1, and this one is still available today. Pretty amazing that it still works. And back then, it was one of the best drumming apps on iOS. And I would argue that there are people in the audience that will swear by this drum machine still to this day and say that this is the best one. Need any CR78 sounds, 808 sounds, 909 sounds, acoustic sounds? It had it all. A straightforward sequencer, 32 steps, effects, mixer, and it even got an upgrade for iPhone, also available on the App Store. I still love this drum machine, but do I still use it? The answer is no. I stopped using it when DM2 got introduced by Fingerlab because that thing is basically drum synthesis. The next app is still available for both iPhone and iPad, and it has a very special place in my heart and a very special place in the haQ attaQ show. You see, if you recognize this track or this track, these 2 tracks were both directly made inside iK Oscillator by Korg. No other instruments were used. I was using the internal recording feature, and so I basically just performed tracks. And in the case of this track, well, you can actually see the video in where I'm performing this exact version of the track. You see, the take I did in that video is what I then used for my background track. iK Oscillator lies in the same category as Figure. Basically just straightforward, finger right on the touchpad, perform, make music easily, work within scales. It's a great app. So am I still using iK Oscillator? Well, the answer is no, I'm not. And it only has to do with the drums, because all of the drum loops are ready-made drum loops. The way it works is you put your finger down, it starts playing a loop, you move your finger to one side, you add more instruments, you add more fills, you move away from the point, you remove instruments, you remove fills. You cannot change out the way that the rhythms play. So I always go for Figure, because in there I get to build my own drum loops the way I want them. So it's much more useful to me. So because of the drums, I tend to go for Figure, and I haven't actually been touching iK Oscillator for a year or so. Now, there is an app that I purchased back in 2012 that has a long history of success. It's been downloaded a lot, and it's been shown on The Tonight Show, making it so that a lot of people became aware that you could make music with the iPad and iPhone. And I'm talking about Loopy, the original version. It used to be blue. Do you remember that? Well, this thing still works. You cannot buy it from the App Store, but you can still get Loopy HD if you want, and then buy the new one, Loopy Pro, which is a complete masterpiece. But the old version, if you did buy it, still does run on an iPad Pro 2018, running iOS 14 point whatever. But do I still use this app? No. No, I stopped using it when I got Loopy HD. And then after a very long wait, many years later, I stopped using Loopy HD and got myself Loopy Pro instead. So I never stopped using Loopy. I just upgraded. The last app I'm going to mention that I got back in 2012 was an important app for many people. A lot of people spent a lot of money buying a lot of sound packs for it. And it is, of course, Alchemy Synth Mobile Studio, or Alchemy Synth. The company got purchased by Apple, and it was taken off the App Store. And for a long time, you couldn't even download it. You couldn't restore your old sounds. And if you did not have it backed up on an older device, you just couldn't get a hold of it. Now, it turns out that Apple did have plans for it, and it was introduced back into GarageBand much later on. So you can now actually enjoy Alchemy inside GarageBand. It was designed for touch, so it had this nice touchpad where you could morph between 8 different settings for the synth. So it felt kind of like painting with synth sounds at the same time. Now, I still have a version of this app on my old iPad mini 1, but that's the only tablet where I have it. I don't have it anywhere else, nor can I download it anywhere else.
But Jakob, there's a version of it in GarageBand. You just showed it.
Yes, I know there's a version of it inside GarageBand, which makes it a bit special from other synthesizers and apps that have disappeared from the App Store. I'm trying to make a point here, which I'm sure that a lot of you will agree with, so just hear me out. It is a problem on the iOS App Store with trying to keep older versions of things overall, because you can't. You can't just downgrade to stuff when it comes to iOS or apps or anything. In some cases, when you download an app on an older tablet, it will tell you that the new current version can't run. Do you want to download an older version? Meaning there are older versions already there on the App Store, but Apple doesn't give us access to them. And so we can't just downgrade, and I really don't like that. So why is that a problem? Well, updates kind of feel like gambling, and I know this is something that you'll come across no matter what type of platform you're on, but on iOS, since we cannot downgrade at will, you're really gambling here, because your next app update might introduce a bug that completely ruins your workflow, and we've had instances like that happen over and over and over, especially with new iOS versions, but also with minor updates for certain apps. And so what do you do when you end up with a broken app on iOS? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, because there's nothing you can do. You have to wait for either the developer of the app to fix the problem, or you have to wait for Apple to get their shit together and fix the issue. So there's nothing you can do. If you're on desktop, you can just downgrade and use an earlier version that you know is functional. But on iOS, you're out of luck. And this is very frustrating because, as I mentioned earlier, when you sometimes try to download an app on an older tablet, it will tell you that you either need to update your iOS or download an older version of the app. So older versions are there, but you can't access them at will. It's very different on iOS compared to what it is on desktop, where you can find archived sites with older software on it. We don't have that option on iOS. We're just out of luck. So what do we do? What is the solution? Well, the solution in this case doesn't even matter, because the solution would be giving us, the user, access to older versions of apps and older versions of iOS at will, right? But Apple will not do that. At least I don't believe they ever will. I hope I'm wrong about that. So what do you do in the meantime? Well, what you do not do is update early, especially when it comes to big iOS updates. Don't ever update early. Just wait and see, watch the iPad musician group, watch the Audiobus forum, because people will update early and they will definitely talk about when stuff are going horribly wrong with any update. Now, if you like this video, then tell me down below in the comment section, because I'm thinking that this could be a yearly video, that every November we come back to this and we look 10 years back. So next year we'll look back at 2013 and the apps I bought then, and whether they still work, if they're available, if I'm still using them. What do you think? Just tell me down below. If you want to support the work I do here on this channel, give me a thumbs up. And if you don't, if you want to support me financially, check out the link collection down below to my music. And if you don't want to do that, you can also use PayPal or Patreon. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.